You get a lot of American cookbooks occurring. The American Home Cookery book that we're going to talk about a little more. We're going to do 3 recipes today. There is an onion soup recipe. The soup recipe we're doing today I found in 3 different cookbooks, virtually identically, from 1760 into the mid-1900s. A lot of these are written by women. This is really the first time women are really entering the publishing phase really big. This is Lettice Bryan's Kentucky Housewife from 1839. So even that early, women are publishing cookbooks. Huge amount of onions for doing soup, but you're really going to cook them down. One of the big things when you're cooking in this kind of a setting is while your fire is important, your real goal is to build up a bed of coals. Because you're going to be pulling those coals out to put under everything you're cooking. So unless you're boiling something on the crane, you're really trying to build good coals up.
It's all melting in any fire.
Oh, wow. Oh, it's boiling. It's hot over there, huh? Yeah.
And then you add your water to it. Okay. And a slice of bread and some flour to begin thickening it. And the last step, once it's pretty much ready to eat, you beat an egg yolk with vinegar and temper it and put that in.
More eggs. Okay. That's my last.
The flour goes in before any of the water does, and you stir it in. And it's a really thick slurry of cooked onions now. And with that flour in there, it immediately starts thickening up. And it says 4 to 6 cups. I usually use their rule and do say until enough. And with it already being boiling water, you don't lose any heat. It comes up immediately. And then you just drop your slice of bread on top and kind of push it down.
Is there a reason why you're waiting so long to put in your salt? Not exactly.
Yes, into the egg. And you do want to make sure and beat the egg as you're putting the vinegar in, because that really will keep it from curling up.
Oh, you're adding the soup to your egg.
Yeah, I'm tempering the egg a little bit. And there's a recipe for forced meatballs. The Southern Gardener and Receipt book, which one of our recipes comes out of, this was a really comprehensive book, and it's very specific to the American South. And he gives the instructions for raising all of your crops besides recipes to use them. So it becomes a really good source. And any of the printed ones, you still have to kind of transpose the cooking methods to a modern kitchen. But being printed, it's easier than reading a handwritten one. Forced meat means meat that's been ground or chopped. And I know that we're all used to seeing those table clamp meat grinders. Those are actually very late 19th century. This is actually an original 1860s meat grinder. And it would have been clamped to a piece of wood like this. It's got this turn thing, which is not sharp, but it forces your meat through. And there's a series of blades here. And the more we find out about the Vance family, we realize that this is not a frontier outpost store. They have a huge store in San Antonio. They have a store in Hot Springs. This is kind of a commercial dynasty, really. So he's probably, with the size of this store space, he's bringing in a huge amount of goods. And these kinds of grinders would have been very desirable. Basically, we're making a fresh sausage, is really what it ends up being. And then we're gonna roll that in flour and fry it.
The whole thing, so it was something about, it was like a brown.
Suet has a higher melting point than regular fat does, and you find it in puddings and baked goods and things like these horse meatballs, and it gives a really smooth, unctuous texture to your meat. Both of these just have water in them.
First time you've seen it.
The meatballs also have mace in them and nutmeg in them. And do y'all know that mace comes off nutmeg?
No.
It's the covering.
Oh, it's the covering?
That's actually a nutmeg with the mace still on it.
Oh, okay.
And when you see mace that has not already been pre-ground, you see that it's this little skin, this little dried skin off of.
So it'll taste different than the nutmeg?
Yeah, it has a very different flavor to it. I am putting flour in that we're going to be rolling the forced meatballs in to fry them. I always try to buy flours that are not enriched flours because that's going to add a difference in the textural change. And you know, in period there were all different grades of flour. If you've never been to a period flour mill, there's a whole set of screens, and as they grind, it falls through the screens and the different grades trickle through. And by the end, all that's left is the husk. And they would then sell it as, you know, this is grade 1 flour, this is grade 2 flour. You could buy flour in big barrels, or if you were lucky and had a local mill that did milling, you were able to buy flour locally. A lot of local mills farmers would bring their wheat crop in, and instead of paying to have it milled, the miller would keep a percentage of the grind. And that was a good way in a community where cash was not that available to get the work done. You find that trade is a big part of 19th century work. But you know, the shirt sleeves actually protect your arms from the heat. And everybody always has a perception that, you know, you don't roll your shirt sleeves up because it's not proper. Actually, you're not rolling them up because they're protection from if you're working outside or if you're working with fire.
Are y'all putting in flour? No, crumbs. Oh, okay.
Period Dutch oven cooking versus modern Dutch oven cooking. In period, they're never actually putting the food in contact with the Dutch oven.
Oh, it's gonna add the flavor.
Yeah, it'll add a little bit of the meat flavor. I pre-baked some biscuits that we can have when we sit down to eat that are from a period recipe that uses saleratus as a leavening. And that's potassium carbonate. And it begins as a leavening in the 1840s. And then when sodium bicarbonate comes out in the 1850s, saleratus kind of dies off because the sodium bicarbonate's better. The saleratus biscuits, as you'll see, are very different. They're very dense. We always hear in the American South about beaten biscuits, and you think, oh, they must have been lovely and fluffy. They're dense because you have beaten that flour and you've beaten it so the gluten is completely compacted and beaten down. Pearl ash is a byproduct of burning wood down to ash and then matriculating it almost like you do lye.